In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast. We are the brave and the bold.
It pertains to the problem of the brothers who are with you in their unfortunate celibacy and lack in availability of wives for them. In the conditions that have been imposed on them, we pray to God to release them. I wrote Dr. Al-Bahari and consulted with Sheikh Abu Yahya, and Dr. Al-Bahari has written us his opinion. As we see it, we have no objection to clarifying to the brothers that they may, in such conditions, masturbate. Since this is an extreme case, the ancestors approve this for the community. They advised these young men at the time of the conquest to do so. It has been prescribed by the logist when needed. And there is no doubt that these brothers are in extreme need.
The Abracast. Occult, history, conspiracy, and violence.
All right, hey everybody, welcome. I'm John Towers, and this is the Abracast. We are continuing our examination of the events of 9/11 and putting them in historical context. One reason we are doing these episodes are that 9/11 truthers are one of my pet peeves. So if you are tuning in to hear about micro-atomic explosions or energy weapons or inside jobs or magic rituals designed to punch a hole into another dimension or whatever, a moon base with invisible lasers, this might not be the episode for you. I hope you stay and listen, but I don't mind if you go. I was talking to a truther, and one of the things that you hear over and over again is, I can't believe that you just think that 19 dudes grabbed box cutters and did this. So ultimately, this little series, putting 9/11 in context, little series, it's going to be over 3 hours long, I'm pretty sure. And most of those 3 hours are unpacking the word, quote, just, unquote, in the previous sentence. No, I don't think that just 19 guys grabbed box cutters and did this. I don't even think that only 19 guys with backing of an extensive terror network with multiple cells headed by Osama bin Laden did this. And when I get done with this, we are going to see, like we saw a little bit in the last episode, that there were people in our government, intelligence people, law enforcement people, highly ranked, appointed political people, and even elected officials that have blood that was spilled on 9/11 on their hands. And don't even get me fucking started. I don't want to hear how fire doesn't melt steel, okay? Fire melts steel. That's how we have horseshoes. That's how we have swords. They have whole shows on the History Channel about how fire melts steel. Anyhow, it doesn't even need to melt it. It just needs to bend it with the weight of, I don't know, the tallest building in New York and gravity. Explosive combat engineer stuff, you know. If you don't think fire can melt steel, you know, you've never seen those shows on History Channel or just never thought about it. If you heat steel enough, it doesn't have to melt. It just bends. It happens all the time. It's just like that on a much larger scale. So, I feel like I'm amped up already. I'm getting off page. So if you're playing along at home, this is the point where I would like to invite you to summon your vessel of the art. Mix up your favorite weapon of mass distraction. Right tonight, of course, I am rolling with the Jin Jihad because it's thematic. And I'd like to raise a toast to all my Patreon and Subscribe Star supporters. Thank you guys very much. Without you, none of this would be made possible. Hear, hear. Okay, let's do it. Let's get into it. You know, if you're taking science lessons, civics lessons, and history lessons from kids that are in the 9th grade on a fucking YouTube video, you need to reevaluate yourself, bro. Okay, that's it. I'm done now. I'm sorry. Instead, take it from a podcaster who's not a kid, by the way. I haven't been in 9th grade for a long time. Okay, last episode, we started tracking this long chain of events from 1683, where the first 9/11 happened, when the Ottoman Empire was defeated at the walls of Vienna, a crushing defeat at the walls of Vienna by this Polish king, Jan Sobieski III, and the Flying Hussars. We talked about Afghanistan and the eventual defeat of the Soviets and the fall of Russia. Not the fall of Russia, the fall of the Soviet Union. We talked about Desert Storm and finally the World Trade Center bombing in 1993. We ended the episode by talking about this sort of perfect storm in the wake of the World Trade Center bombing. We have financing provided by Osama bin Laden and the Al Farouk Mosque in Brooklyn, fundraising efforts. We have this Khalid Sheikh Mohammed sort of inherited Ramzi Youssef's Wile E. Coyote, super genius, like mastermind book of plans. And they had these training resources with Ali Muhammad translating Special Forces manual right out of Fort Bragg and leaking them to the Mujahideen. There was a recruitment opportunity and resources available, an occupying force in Saudi Arabia, where I think the 19 hijackers actually came from there. We, in bittering the people over there, also there was the religious legitimacy to the whole endeavor provided by the blind sheikh. Even after he was arrested, he was advocating jihad and all of this nonsense. They didn't kill him like they should have. They just locked him up. So after the bombing in 93, these dudes were off to the races. They manufactured 5 1,500-pound bombs, and they started planning what was called the Day of Terror event, where they were going to blow up the Holland Tunnel, and they were going to blow up the Lincoln Tunnel, and they were going to blow up the Washington Bridge. This is like what Bane did in that last Batman movie. They were going to blow up the UN, in which, I mean, I'm not even sure if that's even a bad idea. I mean, I think that I might be able to get behind that. They were going to blow up the FBI building in Manhattan. All 5 bombs were going to go off simultaneously, cutting any escape out of Manhattan, and thousands of people would have just drowned in the tunnels alone. And we're not even talking about the people that would fall off the bridges and like any of that, any stuff like that. Law enforcement focuses on the blind sheikh because he's out there radicalizing believers. There was like a Law and Order did a TV movie, I think, unless I got my wires crossed. And Mr. Big from Sex and the City was in it as his Law and Order character, I think. Maybe I'm confusing two things. Anyhow, there's there's a TV movie about this, about them catching and focusing on the blind sheikh. Because he's part of the puzzle. He's the part of the puzzle that gives these guys religious legitimacy, because he's an actual Islamic scholar. You know, he's like a weird fucking like comic book villain. He wears this Santa Claus hat and Blues Brothers Ray-Bans. But his thing with his eye, if he takes the sunglasses off, he's just got like, his one eye is just this fucking like gnarly marble-like eye, like rolling around dryly in its socket. It's so fucking gross. And he doesn't even have a good story. It's not like he got acid splashed on his face, or he was constructing a bomb that blew up on him, you know, or like caught an RPG, like a Russian RPG to the face. It's not anything like that. He just had like childhood diabetes and went blind. So I don't know. I guess they must have had like crayons or braille or something. maybe an audio book. I'm trying to figure out how this guy becomes a Muslim scholar. I don't know, an audio book. That's funny. Here we go right now. This 11 minutes and 59 seconds in, insert the Audible commercial. Go ahead and put the audio commercial right here. Audible, if you're listening, actually Audible used to, I'm not going to say that. They actually passed on doing commercials for the show. They were like, no, thank you. We heard your Nazi blowjob story, and we don't want to have any part of that. I got to focus on the agents. They had an agent on the inside that was like talking to the blind sheikh on a wire, and they got him talking about his planned bombing. And I think this is where the guy told the blind sheikh that the UN was one of the targets. And the blind sheikh was like, no, don't bomb the UN. The UN's full of good guys. You know, people that are sympathetic to us. So don't bomb them. If you bomb them, everyone will see us as an enemy instead of just bomb the great Satan in the little war, Satan. He said, don't bomb that, bomb something else. The law enforcement people at the time were like, hey, that makes them complicit, right? That makes them complicit. So they arrested his dirty ass and they put him in jail forever, but they didn't kill him like they should have. I don't know if this dude's still alive. He's never gonna see the light of day. Oh, that wasn't even a pun. I just didn't catch it. But across the world in the Philippines, there was a plot that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and Ramzi Youssef were connected to called Operation Bojinka, which sounds hilarious. But this Operation Bojinka was when it's like a number of planes would blow up in midair simultaneously. So now they're thinking of airplanes, you know. And these guys, they were starting to mess around and experiment with liquid explosives, you know, like the last good Die Hard movie. It was the third one, I think, where they were like stuck in New York or whatever. But before, he was like fist fighting airplanes. It's not that one. It's the one where Samuel Jackson's in it. Zeus. The bad guy had that binary liquid bomb, so that it was like they had their finger on the pulse at the time, because these terrorist assholes were experimenting with liquid bombs. at the time. This thing was big. A 9/11 blueprint. So we start to see elements of the 9/11 plan starting to be thought about. Like they were the ones thinking about hijacking multiple planes instead of just one. Hijacking one plane was old hat by 1993. You know, we'd already been through the 70s at that time. Instead of going like, hey, fly me to Cuba so I could be with my fucking shitty communist brothers or whatever, they're like, you know, they're like these planes over to blow them up. Now, they also had a big hang up on doing a bunch of stuff simultaneously. They wanted to kind of prove how organized it all was. So we're going to get into that in a minute, but they were just like, we're going to take, you know, 2 or 3 number of things and make a plan all at once. We're going to show them how organized we are. Also in the Philippines, there was a plot reveal where these guys were going to try to blow up the Pope. That's just a part of the story that I took. I literally stole that as one of the endings to my Jin Jihad book where they blew up the Pope. Graphic novel. Check it out on the website. Osama bin Laden authored 2 fatwas in August 1996 and February 1998. The 1996 fatwa was a declaration of war against America's occupying the land of the 2 holy places. And it whines and complains and moans of American activities in numerous countries. It was faxed to Arab language newspapers internationally, but particularly in England. The 98 fatwa, signed by 5 people who represented specific Islamic groups, who were identified as the World Islamic Front for Jihad Against Jews and Crusaders. The Legion of Doom. A fatwa complains of American military presence in the Arabian Peninsula, the blockade of Iraq, and American support for Israel. It purports to provide religious authorization for the indiscriminate killing of Americans and Jews everywhere. It appears in February 1998, and the embassy bombings followed in August. In February of 1998, this fatwa, the February 98 fatwa, is the first known official order of the World Islamic Front. The fatwa calls for, quote, in accordance with the words of Almighty God, fight the pagans all together as they fight you all together, and fight until there is no more tumult or oppression. And there prevail justice and the faith of God, unquote. The fatwa is widely regarded by terrorism experts as the founding document in the World Islamic Front. The Legion of Doom. This is the only religious rulings bin Laden got into. Since we were putting 9/11 in context, it is worth dipping our toe into this topic. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but if you search for Osama bin Laden's secret masturbation fatwa, you are going to run into this article on foreignpolicy.com. In January, the U.S. government released 49 new documents seized in 2011 from Osama bin Laden's compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan. I'll say it like Obama, Pakistan. Among these items, the 4th and final batch of the bin Laden documents made public since 2012 is a letter addressed to a senior colleague in North Africa, which is on the now deceased Al-Qaeda leader raises, a very special and top secret matter. It pertains to the problem of the brothers who are with you and their unfortunate celibacy and lack of availability of wives. I'm trying to not editorialize so much anymore, and I'm really biting my tongue for them in the conditions that have been imposed on them. And we pray to God to release them. And I wrote to Dr. Al-Zawahiri, and I consulted with Shayaka, who is Abu Yahya. Dr. Amen has written us his opinion as we see it, we have no objections to clarify to the brothers that they may, in such conditions, masturbate. Since this is an extreme case, the ancestors approved this for the community. They advised the young men at the time of the conquest to do it. And it has also been prescribed by the legists when needed. When needed. Fucking underline that. And there is no doubt that the brothers are in a state of extreme need. It goes on to say, in the immediate aftermath of 9/11 attacks, the evolutionary biologist and world-famous atheist Richard Dawkins, who is great, by the way, poured scorn over the notion that the 19 hijackers were motivated by the thoughts of injustice. On the contrary, I was going to try to do my Richard Dawkins impersonation, but I don't have one. On the contrary, he insisted what they really wanted was to get laid, referring to the martyr's reward of 72 virgin brides. He claimed that the testosterone-sodden young men, too unattractive to get a woman in this world, might be desperate enough to go for 72 virgins in the next. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit in this article. A more nuanced version of this argument holds that suicidal jihad violence is rooted in the sexual repressed atmosphere endemic across the Muslim world and in Muslim communities in the West. We see this. We talk about this over and over and over again. In both sexual activities outside the marriage remains taboo, especially for women, not so much for livestock. Boom. According to this argument, the stigma and barriers attached to premarital sex create frustration that in some men boils over into murderous violence, as Christopher Hitchens succinctly puts it in his anti-thelemic polemic, God is not great. Jihadis' problem is not so much that they desire virgins, is that they are virgins. This argument draws support from a rich reservoir of anecdotes about jihadis and their ideologues. For example, the Egyptian thinker Syed Qutb, who is widely credited as formative ideological influence over bin Laden, was notoriously disgusted by sex. Yet few subjects so vigorously aroused his interest and fascination. In one of the articles he wrote about his experience studying abroad in the United States between 1948 and 51, he registered his revulsion at the, quote, American temptress, unquote, with her, quote, expressive eyes and thirsty lips, unquote, quote, round breast, full buttocks, and shapely thighs and sleek legs, unquote. In the same article, he expressed his shock at a dance at a church where the atmosphere was so full of desire. The novelist Martin Amis contended that Qutb's sexual desire, which he was unable to satisfy, made him very afraid and also ashamed, and discouraged him and turned his thoughts to murder. The so-called ringleader of the 9/11 attacks, Mohammed Atta, was also obviously sexually repressed. He willingly enlisted in a mission that would end his life and those of countless others. But he was terrified of women. I think didn't he wear mascara? The pictures they always show of him looks like he wears mascara. I'm like, what? Did they pick this guy up on Forbes? Like, where the fuck did they get this guy? He was terrified of women, refusing to date them or to even shake their hands. In his will, he instructed that his body be prepared for burial by, quote, good Muslims, unquote, and that no woman was to go near it. Women, for Atta, as for Qutb, were dangerous and dirty. If you're lucky, If you're lucky, they're dangerous and dirty. A source of sin and spiritual contamination. All right, we're out of the article now. This is actually why, in my book, the Jinn Jihad, DJINN Jihad, you can find it on abercast.com. In the Djinn Jihad, in the Djinn Jihad, the lamp that the genie is in at the beginning of the story looks kind of like a giant brass cock, because these guys are so repressed. Also, the building that they wind up assaulting in that book looks like a big cock. So we might beat the dead horse at some point in time, but there is material out there if you want to search it out. By this time, bin Laden's hanging out in Afghanistan. And if a familiar face shows up, Dr. al-Zawahiri, Osama bin Laden and al-Zawahiri sort of sit down and they start to kind of like make plans to change the world. In August 7th, 1998, we're creeping up, everybody. We're getting close to the almost simultaneous bombings. Remember, I mentioned that they were obsessed with doing something simultaneously to prove how organized they were. The U.S. embassies, they're bombing the U.S. embassies to take place, one in Kenya and one in Tanzania. They are suicide bombers. 235, I think, dead, thousands wounded, mostly Kenyans and Tanzanians. They were totally taken by surprise. We didn't know where this came from. We thought it was like, I said, they just kept warning us, but they kept sending these fatwas, but they weren't like sending stuff to the White House like, hey, we're going to fuck your shit up. They would do this. They send, these communiques to friendly newspapers in the West, and they were like these Arab-speaking Muslim newspapers in London and so forth. So the average American has no idea that this is all going on. We can look at it and like the parallels of, like the fake news business and stuff that we see nowadays and be like, yeah, well, okay, well, maybe it was always like that. So the standard American, not like there's such thing as a standard American, all Americans are non-standard, had never heard of Osama bin Laden or Al-Qaeda at the time until almost all the way up to 9/11. People hadn't heard of this guy, so when the newspaper starts like putting up pictures of him, they're like, we're pretty sure this is the fucking guy who did it. Most Americans were like, wow, that's miraculous. How did they know who this dude is already? And what I'm saying is you have to put all this stuff in context when you're talking about it, because you get through this and he's already on the top 10 most wanted list. He is not a stranger and was not a stranger he was just a stranger to most of us. This is only because we're not paying attention was he a stranger. He didn't just show up out of nowhere one day and says, hey, we need a scapegoat, pick this guy up off the wall, grab his picture for me, put it up on the TV, which is the way a lot of people think it happened. They were already bombing U.S. embassies. They go on to later, they fucking bomb an actual Navy ship, the USS Cole. Anyhow, okay, let's talk about the American response to all this. 13 days later, President William Jefferson Clinton tomahawks the shit out of these two empty camps. And it's going to wind up developing into an embarrassing habit of the Clinton administration. What he did was he blasted hundreds of dollars worth of enemy tents and shit with millions of dollars of missiles, all the while elevating Osama bin Laden to kind of like the rock star status of the Wahhabists, maybe even the whole Muslim world. And at the time, they were still treating this as a crime. The Clintons Bill always treated this as a crime. He could not think out of the box where this is concerned. And we're going to see the crazy price that America paid for this. Just stick with me. At the time where we're still treating this as a crime, Clinton winds up flying hundreds of, fucking get this, he sent hundreds of FBI guys to do investigations overseas to investigate what happened with these embassy bombings. And I guess if you were going to investigate them, you need FBI guys because technically it's our real estate. But in these two countries, but since they were our embassies or whatever, you know, this is also a staple of the Clinton administration is treating this as a crime, even though these guys declared war on us. They were stuck in this symmetrical mind frame of the difference between a military action and a difference between intelligence gathering activity and the difference between law enforcement. These guys did not understand the enemy. Some of them still don't. And they suffer. Well, a lot of them still don't. Or a lot of them understood them and then now they're misunderstanding them. They suffer from a lack of imagination, a lack of context, a lack of reading the Quran and understanding it. These shortcomings didn't just set the table for 9/11. It set the table. It cooked the turkey. It poured the drinks. It made the dessert. The only thing that it didn't provide was the dinner guests. There is a general confusion between criminal investigations, military action, and intelligence gathering operations. And when we talk about this later in a little bit more depth, but the confusion and miscommunication all became greater and greater between these political investigations and intelligence operations, specifically because of Bill Clinton's political and legal problems. And I'm going to start talking about something that's known as Gorelik's Wall. Do you guys know what that is? Right after this, we're going to get into it.
Learn more at abracast.com. Get bonus content and access to the private Abracast workgroup by signing up for the mailing list. Get all that plus many exclusive episodes by supporting the show at patreon.com or subscribestar.com. On this month's exclusive Order of the Fellowcraft episode.
Towards Mount Rainier, he saw 9 gleaming discs outlined against the snow, each one about the size of a C-54. Is it a function of false reporting? Is it a function of media incompetence or straight up misinformation? From my point of view, every, quote, flying saucer, unquote, story from this point on is at least a suspect for some sort of corruption. It has been over 2 years since the puzzling death of Captain Mantell. Mantell died mysteriously in the skies south of Fort Knox, but before his radio went silent, he sent a strange message to Goodman Air Force Base.
Support the show at patreon.com or subscribestar.com.
You know what I'm saying is, if it wasn't a criminal investigation, why is this guy shooting missiles into the desert everywhere? Other countries would make fun of us at this time. They're like, oh yeah, Uncle Sam's a mad bomber and all of this. Don't mind Bill Clinton, he's just blowing up the middle of the desert so CNN has something to talk about other than him getting his dick sucked by a chubby intern. You know what I'm saying? You got it right. So bin Laden continues to plan their next move. While these FBI guys were there, they arrested someone who was a bomber, and he wound up being the bomber for sure. And they wound up getting a phone number out of this guy, and the phone number they got went to some little building in Yemen. I think in this building, it was just like the mainline, like, command center between bin Laden, who is the financier, and like all the different agents that they have working out there. It's like how this fucking bomber knew what the phone number was. The reason I mention this is because it becomes important later. So Clinton goes on this wild missile attack. 70-something, quote, camps, unquote, were bombed. Pharmaceutical factories were bombed. He's blasting everybody but bin Laden on all of these attempts to distract America from the old cigar and the intern maneuver. So this clown we're going to talk about, and this is one of the really bad actors in this story. He was in the White House at the time. He's this guy, Richard Clarke. And he starts coming onto the scene, and he's like this White House counter-terrorist guy. And for my money, he should actually be in fucking like Leavenworth for treason. Making big rocks into small rocks, bro, for the rest of his fucking days. There are dozens of these instances where these guys call foreign governments. He calls like Jake and Jackie Stan, and he's like, yo, homie, we got an asset right there who's on the ground, and he's looking right at Sheikh a la peanut butter and jelly sandwich, who happens to be on our top 10 most wanted list for bombing schools and fucking nuns with scimitars and shit. Can you go pick him up, pretty please? And we'll be right there to pick him up from you. And when the agents show up and go to scoop him up mysteriously, Sheikh a la peanut butter and jelly sandwich, he gets away. It's not the government of Jake and Jackie Stan that's to blame. It's this fool that's to blame for purposefully warning these people. He's trusting these governments for doing the right thing, but they're not doing the right thing. He did not understand the enemy. They would actually side with Sheikh a la peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and they think that you're gonna you're fucking the big Satan, you're bombing the shit out of everybody, and I think that you're gonna do your dirty work against one of our homeboys, Sheikh a la peanut butter and jelly sandwich. You had an asset on the ground looking at the Sheikh. How much does a fucking bullet cost? Problem solved. We're gonna hear a lot more of this bureaucratic incompetence. And there's a lot more unintended consequences as well. And there is a lot more of this fucking Richard Clarke clown. I'm trying to keep my blood pressure down, bros. I'm trying. Just gotta slow it down. Breathe. Everything's okay. 16 months before 9/11, there's this big meeting of the Legion of Doom. We talked about the Legion of Doom before in Yemen. This is not the wrestlers, you know. This is not the What a Rush, Hawk and Animal. This is from the Justice League. This is Lex Luthor, Solomon Grundy, Cheetah, Sinestro, Legion of Doom. So they're meeting in Yemen, and this building, in this building where we have this phone number, and they are talking about that belonged to the one bomber. The FBI, the CIA, the Keystone Cops, the Three Stooges, Constable Big Mac are all wandering around with their thumbs up their asses because there's this massive communications breakdown. And now you're like, how can there be a massive communications breakdown? The government's this whole big, well-oiled machine. Well, I'm going to tell you in a little while why there was a massive communications breakdown. However, right now, you just have to trust me, bro. Trust me that there was a massive communications breakdown. Like a Led Zeppelin magnitude. It happened because this event went off. These members of the Legion of Doom, Lex Luthor, the Joker, the Riddler, Sinestro, Cheetah, Solomon Grundy, fucking Mirror Master, Captain Cold, they were all there and no one fucking did anything about it. Larry, Moe, and Curly were like, hey, isn't today the Legion of Doom? That Legion of Doom meeting was supposed to happen? And Constable Big Mac was like, oh shit, I didn't even send anybody. And right next to him was Richard Clarke going, oh yeah, and there was a sad trombone sound. So at this time, also members of the hijackers start showing up in the U.S. And is this another case of bureaucratic incompetence? Is this another unintended consequence? This flight school, there was this flight school mystery in Venice, Florida, where these hijackers were being trained. The CIA was running this little tiny airstrip out of Venice, Florida. Right next to the airstrip was a flight school running up to 40 or 50% of the students that are going to take place. They were going to fly the planes on 9/11. The students were Arabs in this flight school, and it's this bureaucratic incompetence. Nah, bro. They were just dudes with box cutters. How could you think that they had anything? In 2001, a CIA agent is handed a file or a brief about a terrorist cell in Brooklyn. We are familiar with this terrorist cell. But this file actually had a fucking picture of Mohammed Atta. And there was this thing called Able Danger. So you guys that are like, my phone isn't listening to me, no one's spying on me, everything is fine. This is back in 2001. The CIA had this thing called Able Danger. And it was part of this big data. They call it big data. And there was a big data gathering program where this computer was like collecting all this data and actually discovered these guys just by looking at their data. So thanks, Google. Thanks, Google. I appreciate that. And all you people over there like, I don't care if Google is watching me. Well, I'm not doing anything wrong. Think about this shit and figure out what they can figure out about you. Like, what kind of fucking deodorant you wear, you know what I'm saying, to market it to you. It's all a marketing ploy. Anyhow, fucking picture Mohammed Atta. He was like the boss on the ground. And months before 9/11, the CIA was handed this guy and his cell to the FBI. This brief told them that they were operating members of Al-Qaeda. They were making efforts in America, that they were affiliated with the Brooklyn cell and the Al Farouk Mosque, and they were who was responsible for the 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center. Because these individuals were here legally, the CIA could take no action or alert the FBI. Is this bureaucratic incompetence? I don't know. Is this unintended consequences? I don't know. Pay attention to the word legally. They were here legally. The CIA couldn't do anything to investigate them further. And they couldn't alert the FBI. Do you know why they couldn't alert the FBI? I don't know. I don't know why. I'm going to tell you why. I don't understand all this bureaucratic incompetence, these unintended consequences. I don't know. I'm going to tell you why. October 2000, off the coast of Yemen, one of the most sophisticated destroyers in our Navy, DDG-67, the U.S. Cole, was taken out by a suicide bomber in a raft. Let that shit sink in for a fucking second. A raft. This fucking guy paddles a raft up to the boat and blows it up. They didn't blow up the whole boat. They blew a 50-foot wide hole in it and wound up killing 17 Marines, dozens of others wounded, and it seems like some sort of bureaucratic incompetence right there, doesn't it, right? So around this time, Clinton orders the CIA and the military to finally kill bin Laden. And they do. They find him. They find him 8 to 10 times. They find him and then they go, hey, Bill, hey, President Clinton, we got this guy. He's in our sights. Can we kill him? And Bill goes, no, just leave him alone. I'm worried about the legality of it. I mean, this is a law enforcement issue, unquote. He's still tied up in this fucking thought that this is a law enforcement problem. And this is not an act of war. I'm fucking sorry. 17 Marines are dead. Your fucking embassies are being bombed. How is this still a legal problem? This, to me, this is not hindsight. I remember when this was all going down. I'm old, right? Remember? So, when I heard about the Cole, I was like, all right, let's get busy. And then nothing happened. They sent some FBI guys to be like, yep, okay, they blew a fucking hole in our boat. We'll investigate this fucking hole. We'll investigate this boat. It's got a giant fucking hole in it. And that's what they do. They send the FBI guys to look at a fucking hole. And the president is like, I didn't know the legality of killing this guy who blew a 40-foot hole in my favorite boat and killed a bunch of my dudes. So Clinton passes on killing bin Laden 8 to 10 times. So we're going to detail these times, but I should mention that if you sign into the degree of the Fulgur Correspondentia this month, I took the liberty of creating an infographic on hitting each and every single one of these points. If I'm going too fast, or you want to maybe just see, it's funny. It starts at 1683 and it's like dot, 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 dot. And as it gets closer to 2000, it's like dot, 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 dot. It's interesting. I suggest if you want to check it out. Clinton just refused to kill this fucker. He had the chance 8 to 10 times on record. The Secret Service guy that carried the briefcase that had the nuclear button in it, they call it the football. He carried the football for Clinton. He wrote a book explaining. He was like, yeah, there was a sniper in this thing and he was aiming at him, and Bill Clinton wouldn't even take the call from JSOC, who was dealing with the operation. They said, we have them in our sights and we need an answer within 5 minutes. And Clinton was like, anyhow, how do I get to this fundraiser? All right, so let's talk about this Gorelick's wall that I mentioned before the break. Remember, it's just mere months away from 9/11. It's the summer of 2001. Deputy Attorney General and also future member of the 9/11 Commission. I'm sure that's not corrupt at all, by the way. This lady named Jamie Gorelick sent a memo to CIA and FBI limiting their collaboration. Leading up to 9/11, it was this policy we've talked a lot about here tonight. The administration was using a mix of law enforcement, intelligence gathering, and a military to combat this terrorist threat. Intelligence, law enforcement now is even more limited in their possible collaboration. Remember what I said when Abel Danger was able to make the connection between this Brooklyn Al-Qaeda cell? It was because these individuals were here legally. The CIA could take no action to alert the FBI. Gorelick's wall is why. This memo, the CIA and the FBI limiting their collaboration. Traditionally, the CIA and FBI, they have this thing called the Chinese wall for a long time. But this is just to protect CIA agents or their sources from legal prosecution from the FBI, because the CIA hires a lot of shitty fucking people, because that's the people that are in the environments where the CIA works. For the FBI, where it's just like these guys, they had the FBI, he's in there and he's making their bombs and he's in the warehouse in Brooklyn. This is that Salam guy who was posing with them. He had as far as the FBI is concerned, they had that Salam dude who was embedded in the cell with the Al Farouk Mosque. He was embedded with the Blind Sheikh. He was making their bombs. He was making their bombs. He's in this warehouse in Brooklyn for this Day of Terror thing. And the fear was that if the CIA had this guy's number, they might try to use him or whatever. But since the Joint Terrorism Task Force and the FBI were handling him, so, it breaks it up. It makes sure that they're not competing for, these assets or this information or whatever. So there is the agents not fucking each other over accidentally. So this Chinese wall had been in effect for a long time. However, this Gorelick's wall is entirely different. I found a great article about this from the Washington Times. And this article is called Jamie Gorelick's Wall, April 15th, 2004. I would like to read you some of it if I can. And here it goes. The disclosure that Jamie Gorelick, a member of the September 11th Commission, was personally responsible for instituting a key obstacle to cooperation between law enforcement and intelligence operations before the terrorist attack raises disturbing questions about the integrity of the Commission itself. Mrs. Gorelick should not be cross-examining witnesses. Instead, she should be required to testify about her own behavior under oath. Specifically, commission members need to ask her about the 1995 directive she wrote that made it a little bit more difficult for the FBI to locate two September 11th hijackers who had already entered the country by the summer of 2001. On Tuesday, Attorney General Ashcroft declassified a 4-page directive sent by Mrs. Gorelick, the number 2 official in the Clinton Justice Department. On March 4th, 1995, the FBI Director Louis Freeh and Mary Jo White, New York-based U.S. attorney investigating the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. In the memo, Gorelick ordered Freeh and White to follow information sharing procedures that go beyond what is legally required in order to avoid any risk of creating an unwarranted appearance that the Justice Department was using foreign intelligence surveillance FISA warrants instead of ordinary criminal investigative procedures in an effort to undermine the civil liberties of terrorism suspects. It's funny, there's speculation. Actually, what she was trying to do was stop the collaboration between Clinton and the Chinese through, what's the fucking guy's name? The Lippo Group. And there's a guy associated with it. You know, this is how the Chinese got nuclear secrets and all this stuff, is they were basically selling them to them. And this is the reason why Gorelick, when I say they were selling it to them, what I meant is the Clintons were selling it to the Chinese. And this is actually why Gorelick's wall went up. I'm not saying that's what went down. I'm saying that's a theory, yo. It's a theory. And it's true. At issue was the oft-noted wall of separation that prevented counterterrorism agents and federal prosecutors from communicating with one another prior to September 11th. Information collected under special FISA warrants, which do not require probable cause, was generally not to be shared with personnel responsible for enforcing federal criminal laws, where probable cause must be demonstrated for a warrant to be issued. This is all Donald Trump collusion nonsense. This is how they were able to get warrants, FISA warrants, to tap his campaign. Yeah. Where probable cause must be demonstrated for a warrant to be issued. As lawyers David Rivkin and Lee Casey noted on our op-ed page yesterday, the practical effect of the wall was that counterintelligence information was generally kept away from the enforcement personnel who were investigating Al-Qaeda activities. But Ms. Gorelick's memo clearly indicates that the Clinton administration had decided as a matter of policy to go even beyond that law's already stringent requirement in order to further choke off information sharing. Mr. Ashcroft noted during his testimony before September 11th Commission, all of this had a devastating effect into the investigation of Al-Qaeda operations in this country in the summer of 2001. For example, in late August, when the CIA told the FBI that Khalid al-Mahedar and Nawaf al-Zahemi had entered the country, FBI investigators refused to permit criminal investigators with considerable knowledge about the most recent Al-Qaeda attacks to join the manhunt. Also, a criminal search warrant to examine the computer of Zakawakis Mussolini, whose interest in flying aircraft had attracted attention. But it was rejected because FBI officials were afraid of breaching Gorelick's wall. Mrs. Gorelick has been among the most partisan and aggressive Democratic panel member in questioning, I wonder why, the anti-terror efforts of the Bush administration. The nation deserved a full accounting from Gorelick of why the Clinton administration felt it necessary to go the extra mile in order to hamper the capability of law enforcement and intelligence agents to talk to one another. I just explained it to you. If Mrs. Gorelick fails to provide this, her actions would bring into serious doubt the credibility of the commission. Well, guess what? This was written in 2004. I'm here to tell you, 2019, she never explained it. I just explained it to you. Anyhow, it was never given. She never went under oath. She never explained herself. So that's what I'm saying. Bureaucratic incompetence? Question mark. I don't know. Unintended consequences? For sure. I don't know. I don't know if it was unintended consequence. I can speculate that it is. I don't want to hear this stuff. I'll tell you what it is. It's all about this massive Clinton crime incorporated. I mean, the Clintons were selling China nuclear secrets through the Lippo Group. James Riotti was the dude's name. Backdoor nuclear deals to Korea. Actually, this is why we're having to deal with Korea right now, by the way. They are Clinton, Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, Sandy Berger, and this fucking Richard Clark fucking clown. They are the reasons we have to deal with all this shit right now, still to this day. So in our timeline, we all know what happens next. And that'll be on Friday. I'm John Towers. This is the Abercast. I hope you have a good day. Thanks to the folks who's supporting, by the way, on Subscribestar and Patreon.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Send an email or visit us on social media to let us know what you think about this topic. And please remember to leave a 5-star rate and review. On this month's exclusive Order of the Fellowcraft episode.
Towards Mount Rainier, he saw 9 gleaming discs outlined against the snow, each one about the size of a C-54. Is it a function of false reporting? Is it a function of media incompetence or straight up misinformation? From my point of view, every, quote, flying saucer, unquote, story from this point on is at least a suspect for some sort of corruption. It has been over 2 years since the puzzling death of Captain Mantell. Mantell died mysteriously in the skies south of Fort Knox, but before his radio went silent, he sent a strange message to Goodman Air Force Base.
Support the show at patreon.com or subscribestar.com.